Alright, so as you start designing in Altia Design, there's certain times where you want to create precision in your rotation points. I'll start by a simple example that shows you how to at least affect to some degree the rotation point you're going to use on any given object. But sometimes you need it so pixel perfect, for example, for automotive gauges that have those rotating needles, that I'll teach you a secondary trick for that as well. Alright, so let's first start by showing the original sort of rotation point that's built straight into the tool with no additional tricks, and that is just done by regular animation processes like this. So of course you if we're going to make our own little needle, let me make it actually just slightly thicker so that the visual cue that I'll be talking about is a bit more visible here, and we're going to animate it. So the first thing we do is group it, and I will just call this rotate or speed. Let's call it RPM. Yeah. Alright. So define state 0 of RPM. Now this is a pretty fat needle. Once again, I drew it pretty fat so that it's clear where this rotation point that I'll be talking about is. If I select the rotation tool now, you can see I've got these rotation icons that I can click on, and that's what will choose where I'm going to rotate that object. So I want to rotate it around this point right here. So I click that object, and then I can set a direction, clockwise, counterclockwise, or an angle. For example, 180 would rotate it 180 degrees over there, and I could literally give it 180 if I wanted a single state per degree of rotation, or I could even choose something higher than that, like 500, and click define. Now when I select the animation in the animation pane, I can then page through it there. And that looks pretty darn good because we drew the object and we had perfect control at the time of drawing of where that one of those selectable control handles would fall. However, if you're trying to rotate an image and that image has padding around it, or the rotation point just isn't anywhere that matches nicely up with one of these control points here, I'll show you how to do that now. Okay, the first step to this one will be bringing in an image to rotate. So I'll start on the insert ribbon, and I'll choose image object and drag in an image object. Now I have a path to the image I want to use already in my copy buffer, so I'll just hit Control V and enter, and we've got our image. Now you can see that this image has a very large amount of padding on all sides, and what I mean by that is the control handle. There's a lot of transparent pixels on all sides of the actual non-transparent pixels, so that if we were to choose the rotation tool, none of these control points here on the corners or the edges really match the point of rotation. The point of rotation is really right here, right? So this is what we'll talk about, and if you just click and drag, by the way, it just defaults to the point, the center point. That's not what we want. So what we want to do is use the custom rotation point trick, and it's really quite simple to set up. Let me just move this guy out of the way real quick so I can have a little bit more room. What we want to do is actually just copy and paste this object. Now when you paste an object, it moves it away from where it was 10 pixels by 10 pixels. So you can use the transform or precise move to actually just put it back -10 and +10 to put it back on itself if you'd like. Oops, I did that wrong, but it's a good time to point out that mode switch. There's a relative or an actual. So I actually moved it to coordinate -10, 10, and did not check this relative box. So let me undo that and show you the difference. If I do precise move and make sure to turn on relative, I do want to do -10 and +10 for a relative movement, and that just puts it back right on top. Of course, because you know it's the same image, I could have just as easily selected both objects and aligned their left edge and then aligned their bottom edge. It's really up to you. I'm just kind of giving you guys some overview methodology of manipulating objects' position. Once you have them on top of each other, though, that's the objective here. You want to click on transform and say flip vertical. What this does is it allows you to take the object you've flipped vertical and sort of move it up, and you can use the arrow keys for this too. What you want to do though is get it to where it looks like it's right on top of the point of rotation, so the two objects are sort of sharing that center point, right? Once that happens, you can confirm that it's exactly right. Let me bump it up a few pixels here so that you can see what I'm talking about here. You can confirm by pressing and holding Control and then hitting X to cut it and then Z to undo. And see, that's a pronounced shimmy. It's clearly in the wrong point. But as you use the arrow keys to snuff it up, you can continue to do that. Control X, Control Z, to really Control X, Control Z, Control X, Control Z, until you see, yep, that's really there. There's not really any shimmy. Okay, so you know it's in the right spot. What you want to do then is select both objects. Control select in Navigator, or Control select here as well. Same principle. Once you have both objects selected, make sure to group them. And notice what we've done. See how the control points are now basically center, exactly where we want to rotate? That allows us now to define an animation and simply click and drag, because default is center, or we could still use the numeric input but just choose the center rotation point. The idea is that we created our own custom center rotation point so that this new needle can now rotate exactly where we want. Now, in order to make your needle not look like a propeller, go ahead and select the bottom object and just tell it to hide. Okay, and then go back to your group level. Make sure to focus out to your group level. And again, what I mean by focus in and focus out is when you focus in, you traverse into your hierarchy, and when you focus out, you traverse out of your hierarchy. Navigator does this automatically for you by just selecting objects. It will also change your focus level, but you can use the focus in and focus out buttons to do the same thing. Alright, so the idea is we've got two image objects. We hid one of them because we did not want our needle to look like a propeller. We're now going to define an animation on this group, and we're free to use the click and drag method because we've created our own custom center pivot point. Alright, so let's go back to the animation pane now and call this one, we've got already have an RPM, let's just call it speed. And we can click and drag and put this down here somewhere. Define 0 and then maybe click and drag about the same angle, doesn't have to be perfect, and maybe give that 450 states or whatever we want. So again, using the roller mouse, or if we select this guy here, we can see that that's a very good, nice animation. Notice the control handles are kind of bouncing all over the place. That's because it still has that propeller guide image that we created our center and later hid. Now that the animation is defined with that rotation point in mind, you're free to select that unused hidden object, the hidden one there, and actually just delete it. So that's what I'm going to do now, just edit cut, and you can see we've just got the group with the one image object we care about, and it's perfectly rotating. If you want to see it without the control handles jumping around, just go ahead and make sure that nothing is selected, and make sure that speed is down here, and you can use the you can use your roller mouse or the arrow keys there. Alright, so that's really the greatest and easiest way to create your custom pivot point that is really pixel for pixel exactly where you want it to, regardless of the image content that you're trying to rotate.